The voice that started in the dark. It was midnight. At the edge of the city, an old street lay almost silent. Cars rarely passed there, and the only sound was the faint dripping of rainwater still sliding off the rooftops. The storm had just ended, leaving the asphalt glistening under the dim orange glow of the streetlights. Reflections of light trembled across the wet pavement, but something about the night felt different. Too heavy, too still. Ethan Miller walked down the street, heading home from a late shift at work. In his hand, he carried a small bag stuffed with old files and paperwork. He had walked this route dozens of times before, but tonight felt wrong. The air seemed thicker, charged with something he couldn't explain. Then, cutting through the silence, came a whisper. At first it was so faint he thought it was just his imagination. But then it came again, closer, clearer, words he couldn't quite understand, spoken in a voice that wasn't fully human. "Don't leave, stop. This belongs to your path." Ethan froze, his chest tightening. His eyes darted around the street. No one. The houses lining the road were dark, windows lifeless. This part of the city had been abandoned for years, yet the whisper grew louder, pulling at his nerves. That was when he noticed it. The old black house at the corner. Its windows were broken, its front door sagging open as if waiting for someone. The whisper seemed to bleed out from inside. "Why am I even stopping?" he muttered under his breath. "I should just keep walking." But his legs betrayed him. Step by step, they carried him closer. With every stride, the voice grew more insistent. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language he knew. And yet, somehow, he understood it, each syllable sinking straight into his chest like a hook. The moment he reached the porch, a sharp gust of wind flung the door wider. The darkness inside was absolute, yet somewhere deep within, a faint glow pulsed like a dying ember. Ethan hesitated. Two voices clashed in his mind. "Don't go in. This is madness. Enter. The answer you've been searching for lies here." Slowly, he crossed the threshold. The wooden floor groaned beneath his weight. Dust swirled up with every step, thick and suffocating. Then he noticed it. An ancient mirror still hanging on the wall, its frame cracked but intact. Something flickered across its surface. Ethan leaned closer and froze. The reflection staring back at him wasn't his own. It was another man, hollow eyes, face pale and shadowed, staring with a knowing smile. "You're late," the figure whispered. Ethan stumbled backward, his pulse thundering. But the face in the mirror didn't vanish. It only grinned wider, as if it had been waiting for this very moment. The mirror's secret. Ethan's throat went dry as the figure in the mirror stared back at him. His own reflection had vanished completely, replaced by this pale man with hollow, unblinking eyes. For a long, tense moment, neither of them moved. Only the faint creak of the old house filled the silence. Then, without warning, the man in the mirror leaned forward, closer than any reflection should. His face pushed against the glass from the inside, as though the mirror were a thin veil barely holding him back. "You shouldn't have come here alone," the man whispered, his lips curling into a grin. Ethan stumbled further back, nearly tripping over a broken floorboard. He wanted to run, to slam the door and never return, but his body felt rooted to the spot. Something in that whisper held him, as if invisible strings were pulling his limbs. "Who are you?" Ethan managed to choke out. His voice sounded strange in the hollow space of the house, like it didn't belong to him. The man tilted his head. His eyes were dark pits, swallowing the dim light from the far room. "I am the one who remembers. I am the one who waits. And you," his voice deepened, turning almost guttural. "I am the one who remembers. I am the one who waits. And you," his voice deepened, turning almost guttural. "You are the one who has finally answered." Ethan's chest tightened. None of it made sense. He glanced away from the mirror, hoping to break free from its hold, but then something strange happened. The whisper he had been hearing outside returned, only now it came from all around him. It seeped from the cracked walls, from beneath the floorboards, from the ceiling itself. "Don't leave him. Don't abandon him again. You promised." Ethan clutched his head. The voices overlapped, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, weaving into each other like a chorus of the dead. He stumbled forward, desperate to shut them out, and his hand brushed against the surface of the mirror. It wasn't cold. It was warm, pulsing like skin. Ethan yanked his hand back, horrified, but the figure inside pressed closer, palms flat against the glass, as if trying to push through. "Do you feel it?" the man whispered. "The bond between us hasn't broken. Not yet." "What bond?" Ethan snapped, fear sharpening into anger. "I don't know you. I've never seen you before in my life." The man's smile widened, his teeth too sharp, too many. "That's what you think. But I know your face, Ethan Miller. I knew it long before you were even born." The house groaned, as if something massive shifted within its walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The floorboards beneath Ethan's feet trembled like the house itself was breathing. Suddenly, from deep inside the hallway, a faint light appeared, pale and flickering, like a lantern being carried by invisible hands. It swayed gently, moving closer. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to flee, yet something in that light called to him. The man in the mirror glanced toward the glow, and for the first time, his expression changed. The smile faltered. His hollow eyes narrowed. "They're here," he hissed. "They? Who's here?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. The figure didn't answer. Instead, he raised one long, thin finger and pressed it to his lips. "Chill. If they find you first, you won't live to hear the truth." Before Ethan could respond, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and the man's face vanished into blackness. Ethan staggered back, his own reflection flickering faintly into view for the first time since he entered. His pale, wide-eyed face looked as terrified as he felt. The light in the hallway drew closer, casting eerie shadows that crawled across the walls. Ethan's breath quickened. Something or someone was coming. And for the first time that night, Ethan realized he wasn't just dealing with a haunted house. He had walked into the middle of something much bigger, something that had been waiting for him. The whisper returned, softer now, almost tender, curling around his ear like a secret. "Don't run, Ethan. It's already too late." The lantern bearer. The pale light in the hallway grew brighter, swaying slowly as if carried by unseen hands. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. He backed away from the mirror, but no matter how far he stepped, he couldn't escape the narrow pull of that hallway. The glow stretched longer shadows across the cracked wallpaper, turning the house into a grotesque painting where everything felt alive. The wooden floor creaked with a deliberate rhythm. Step. Pause. Step. The sound was too heavy, too human to be the wind. "Hello," Ethan called out before he could stop himself. His own voice startled him, loud and fragile in the cavernous silence. He immediately regretted speaking. The air thickened, the light stopped moving. Whoever or whatever was carrying it had heard him. A moment later, the light advanced again, closer this time. Ethan could now see its shape, an old lantern, iron-framed, its glass cracked and fogged from within. The glow wasn't firelight, though. It pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. Finally, a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't the man from the mirror. It was taller, gaunter, wrapped in what looked like rotted black cloth that clung to its frame. Its skin was gray, stretched thin, and where its eyes should have been there was only darkness. Yet it carried the lantern delicately, almost reverently, as if the glowing object was more alive than it was. Ethan's body locked up. His mind screamed to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The figure stopped at the end of the hall, holding the lantern forward. Its voice slithered through the silence, dry and rasping. "You've returned." Ethan's stomach dropped. Returned? He had never set foot in this place before. "I don't know you," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know what this place is. I was just..." The figure tilted its head sharply, a jerky motion like a broken marionette. "You lie." The whispering that had haunted Ethan outside the house returned, this time swirling from every direction, overlapping in dozens of voices. "He knows. He remembers. He can't escape again. Don't let him go." The lantern's light flared suddenly, filling the hall with a harsh glow. Ethan shielded his eyes, but through the brilliance he saw something that made his blood freeze. On the walls, Where the light touched, shapes emerged. Dozens of faces pressed against the plaster as if they were trapped inside the very bones of the house. Their mouths moved in silent screams, their eyes wide and glassy. "No," Ethan whispered, stumbling backward. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The figure with the lantern stepped closer, and the faces on the walls writhed as if reaching toward Ethan, their mouths shaping his name. "Ethan Miller," the figure rasped. "You left us once. You won't leave again." Ethan's breath caught. His heart pounded so violently he thought it might burst. He turned on his heel and sprinted toward the door. The floor buckled beneath his feet, boards snapping like brittle bones, but he forced himself forward. He reached the open doorway, the night air waiting just beyond it, freedom so close he could almost taste it. But as he leapt for the exit, the mirror on the wall flashed. The pale man's face reappeared, eyes burning, grin wider than before. "Running won't save you, Ethan." The door slammed shut before he could reach it, locking him inside with a thunderous finality. Ethan pounded his fists against the wood, but it didn't budge. The lantern's glow bathed his back, stretching his shadow long and thin across the floor until it touched the mirror. The man inside the glass chuckled. "The house has claimed you." And behind Ethan, the lantern bearer stepped closer, its rasping breath crawling across the back of his neck. "The house that breathes." Ethan's fists pounded the front door until his knuckles burned, but the wood didn't so much as crack. It was as if the door wasn't wood anymore, more like stone, or something far worse, a living wall that refused to let him out. His breath came in ragged bursts as he spun around, pressing his back against the sealed exit. The lantern bearer still stood in the hallway, its glowing light pulsing in rhythm with Ethan's heartbeat. The gaunt creature tilted its head, and when it spoke, its voice wasn't alone. It was layered with the cries of a dozen others. "You can't leave. Not this time." Ethan's chest tightened. The words "not this time" scraped at his thoughts like nails. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but terror held his tongue. Instead, he darted sideways, deeper into the house, hoping there might be another exit. The air grew heavier the further he went. The old walls groaned as if the house itself disapproved of his escape. Dust drifted down in clouds, stinging his eyes. Every breath tasted stale, laced with mold and something metallic, like blood. He reached a narrow staircase, curling upward into darkness. The lantern's glow behind him dimmed, but didn't fade. The creature was following. "Think, Ethan. Just think," he whispered to himself. "Find a window. Break it. Get out." He charged up the stairs, his shoes slamming against the creaking steps. At the top, he stumbled into a long hallway lined with doors. Each one was shut, their paint peeling, their handles rusted. The air was colder here, so cold that his breath came out in pale clouds. He grabbed the nearest handle and yanked. Locked. He tried the second, locked. Third, same. Then, behind the fourth door, he heard it. Knocking. Slow, deliberate knocks coming from the other side. Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the knob. His instinct screamed to run, but some part of him, the same reckless part that had pulled him into the house in the first place, leaned closer. "Hello," he whispered. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then a voice, faint but urgent, pressed against the door. "Ethan, please help us." His stomach twisted. The voice wasn't the rasp of the lantern bearer, nor the hollow whisper of the mirror man. It sounded human, frightened, desperate. He rattled the knob again. Still locked. He shoved his shoulder against the wood, once, twice, 3 times, until it cracked and splintered. With one final push, the door burst open, and Ethan staggered back, choking. The room was filled with shadows, dozens of them, writhing like smoke but shaped like people. Their faces were blurred, their hands stretched toward him. Their mouths moved in silent screams, though one of them, the one that had spoken, looked almost clear. It was a woman. Her eyes were wide and pleading, her lips forming his name again and again. "Ethan, Ethan, Ethan." He stumbled backward into the hallway, slamming the door shut, his heart pounding so violently he thought he might collapse. The whispers bled through the cracks in the wood, pressing at his ears, but he forced himself to turn away. At the far end of the hall, the lantern bearer appeared again, the glow of its lantern burning brighter. The faces inside the walls twisted and contorted, their eyes following Ethan's every move. And then, from behind him, the mirror man's voice whispered, not from the glass this time, but from directly inside his head. "You're remembering, aren't you? You've been here before. You left them here." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, clutching his temples. "No, I don't know this place. I don't know any of you." But even as he shouted, a memory flickered, like a spark in the darkness. A staircase, this same hallway, a lantern glowing in the distance, and his own hand reaching for the door to that same room years ago. The memory was gone as quickly as it came, leaving him trembling. The lantern bearer stepped forward. The shadows in the room whispered his name. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, inhaling, exhaling. And for the first time, Ethan realized the truth. The house wasn't just haunted. The house was alive, and it wanted him back. The house remembers. Ethan's lungs burned as he stumbled down the endless hallway, the walls groaning like they were shifting around him. Every step felt heavier, every breath harder to take, as though the house itself was swallowing the air from his chest. His mind screamed at him to run, to break free, but his body moved like he was caught in thick water. Behind him, the lantern bearer's light swayed steadily, never rushing, never slowing. It didn't need to chase him. The house was doing the chasing for it. Ethan reached the end of the corridor and flung open another door. He barely looked inside before hurling himself through it, slamming it shut behind him. The room he entered was strange, too big to exist within the house he thought he knew. It stretched on, walls lined with shelves that sagged under the weight of objects, clocks with shattered faces, rusted tools, yellowing photographs, dolls with cracked porcelain skin. Every surface was cluttered, every item coated in dust, yet each one pulsed faintly with the same heartbeat rhythm as the lantern's glow. Ethan moved carefully, his footsteps crunching on glass. His eyes darted from shelf to shelf, scanning the bizarre collection. And then he saw it. On the middle shelf sat a small wooden box. Its lid was carved with a name. Ethan Miller. His own name. His stomach lurched. He reached for it hesitantly, his fingers trembling. The wood felt warm, alive, almost like skin. He lifted the lid. Inside lay a silver key, tarnished with age. The moment he touched it, whispers flooded his ears. Not from the house this time. Inside his head. "You left us. You locked us away. Now you've returned to finish what you began." Ethan dropped the box with a gasp, the sound echoing through the cavernous room. He clutched the key in his fist without realizing it, his pulse racing. The shells around him began to rattle. The clocks ticked wildly, their hands spinning backwards. The dolls' heads jerked to face him, their glassy eyes glinting. The photographs curled and blackened as though burning from an unseen fire. And then, from a far corner, the mirror man appeared again. Not inside a mirror this time, but standing in the flesh, though his body shimmered faintly, as if he didn't fully belong in this world. "You're holding the key," the man said, his voice like ice sliding over stone. "Do you remember what it unlocks?" Ethan's throat was dry. He shook his head violently. "No, I don't know what any of this means." The man smiled, stepping closer, his hollow eyes glowing faintly. "It unlocks what you sealed, the door you swore never to open again. But the house remembers, even if you do not. And now I want you to finish." Ethan backed away, clutching the key tighter. "I didn't seal anything. I've never been here before." The mirror man's grin widened. "Lies are useless here. The house keeps every memory, even the ones you've buried." The walls shuddered violently, objects tumbling from the shelves. Dust filled the air like smoke. Ethan spun around, desperate for another exit, and spotted a narrow doorway on the far side of the room. He bolted toward it, the key still in his grip. But before he could reach it, the lantern bearer stepped through the threshold, blocking his path. The light of its lantern flared brighter, throwing Ethan's shadow across the wall. His shadow didn't match him anymore. It twisted, stretching into something monstrous with long claws and jagged teeth. Ethan froze, staring at the distorted shape of himself, horrified. The lantern-bearer lifted its head, its voice rasping louder than before. The key, the door, the debt. You cannot run from what you owe. The whispers surged again, hundreds of voices overlapping until they were deafening. The shelves toppled, glass shattered, the dolls screamed with laughter. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching his head, the silver key burning hot in his palm. The truth pressed in on him, suffocating. The house wasn't just alive. It remembered him, and it would never let him go until he remembered it too. The sealed door. Ethan could barely breathe. The key burned in his palm like a brand, searing his skin. He wanted to let go, to throw it across the room and run, but his fingers wouldn't obey. They clamped tighter and tighter around the metal until his knuckles turned white. The lantern-bearer stood motionless, its eyeless face fixed on him, the lantern's glow pulsing like a beating heart. Behind it, the mirror man lingered in the flicker of shadow, his grin a jagged crescent of mockery. The door, the mirror man whispered, his voice echoing as though spoken from inside Ethan's skull. It waits where you left it. It waits for you, Ethan Miller. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan shouted, his voice raw. I've never been here. I've never sealed any door. The house groaned, as if mocking his denial. The floor beneath him trembled, and dust poured down like ash from the ceiling. The shelves collapsed one by one, scattering objects across the floor. Broken clocks, shattered dolls, photographs with faces torn out. Each fragment seemed to hum with the same rhythm as the lantern, binding him tighter to the house. Ethan stumbled to his feet and darted past the lantern-bearer, clutching the burning key. To his surprise, the creature did not chase him. It only turned its head, following his movements with that slow, deliberate precision, as though it knew he couldn't truly escape. The door at the far end of the room gaped open. Ethan burst through it, slamming it behind him. The new hallway was narrower, suffocatingly tight. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and the air reeked of rot. His footsteps echoed unnaturally, like the walls themselves were listening. At the end of the hall stood another door. Unlike the others, it wasn't rotted or broken. It was solid, carved from dark wood that seemed untouched by time. Strange symbols had been etched into it. Spirals, jagged lines, shapes that made Ethan's eyes ache if he stared too long. He froze. He didn't recognize the markings, yet his stomach twisted with the certainty that he should. The whispers returned, louder now, crawling through his ears like insects. You left it here. You sealed it shut. You promised never to return. Ethan shook his head violently. No, that's not me. That's not me. But his hand lifted on its own, the silver key trembling between his fingers. The carved symbols seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. Waiting, he took a step forward, then another, and another. By the time he reached the door, sweat poured down his face. His hand shook violently as he raised the key toward the lock. His reflection flickered in the tarnished metal handle, but it wasn't truly his reflection. It was the mirror man, staring back with hollow eyes, lips curled into a knowing smile. You remember now, don't you? The figure whispered through the reflection. Ethan's breath hitched. A flash of memory seared his mind. Him, younger, standing in this very hallway, the same key in his hand. Behind him, voices screaming. In front of him, this door waiting, and the overwhelming sense that whatever lay behind it had to be sealed away at any cost. The memory vanished, leaving him trembling. No, he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. I didn't do this. I couldn't have. The key hovered inches from the lock. His body wanted to turn it. His soul wanted to run. Behind him, the lantern-bearer's light flared down the hallway, closer than before. The shadows writhed along the walls, faces pressing outward, their mouths stretching open in silent terror. The mirror man's voice purred inside his head. Open it, Ethan, or the house will open it for you. Ethan's hand shook as the key slid into the lock, and the door exhaled. The evening settled over the town with a heavy stillness, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. The children had grown quieter now, no longer laughing or running about the yard the way they had in the earlier parts of the story. Instead, They gathered close to the porch, whispering nervously as the wind rustled through the trees. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching longer and darker than it should have, as though the night itself was reaching for them. Inside the house, the old lantern flickered faintly, casting trembling patterns on the walls. The woman who had taken shelter there, Ania, pressed her back against the wooden frame of the window and peered out at the dirt road. She felt a strange pull in her chest, as if something beyond the trees was calling her by name. No voice spoke aloud, yet the sensation was undeniable, an invitation, or perhaps a warning. She thought about leaving, about taking the children by the hand and escaping into the safety of the town center. But deep down she knew that whatever had begun here was not something she could run from. The air was heavy with the sense of an unfinished story, of secrets buried under the soil of this land. Her heart beat fast, not from fear alone, but from the realization that she was no longer just a bystander. The children looked to her now, eyes wide with trust and dread. She forced a small smile, though her hands trembled. "It's all right," she whispered. "We'll face it together." And then, just as she spoke those words, the lantern went out. Darkness swallowed the room whole, and outside the window, a figure moved slowly under the streetlight, its presence unmistakable, though its face remained hidden in shadow. Ania realized the time for waiting was over. Whatever haunted this place had finally stepped closer. The night in the forgotten village dragged on like a fever dream. The wind pressed against the crooked wooden houses, carrying with it the faint sound of something moving in the distance, something neither animal nor human. Elena, who had taken it upon herself to guide the others, clutched the rusty lantern with shaking fingers. Its dim light swayed over broken fences and hollow windows, as though the shadows themselves leaned in to listen. Behind her walked Armin, tall and tense, his hand never straying far from the old hunting knife at his belt. He kept scanning the edges of the road, with the tall grass bent unnaturally, as if something crawled just beneath. The others, 3 villagers too frightened to speak, followed closely, their breaths sharp and quick in the cold air. They had left the crumbling chapel behind, but the unease hadn't lifted. Instead, it deepened. Every time the group passed an abandoned barn or an overgrown path, Elena felt the sensation of being counted, observed, weighed. There was no sound of crickets, no rustling of birds, only the creak of their boots against the damp earth and the faint hum that seemed to grow louder the deeper they walked into the heart of the village. Suddenly, one of the villagers, a young man named Daniar, froze. "Wait," he whispered hoarsely, his voice trembling. "Do you hear it?" Everyone stopped. At first, there was nothing. Then, from somewhere ahead, came a low murmur, like 100 voices whispering at once. It wasn't language, not really, but a constant churning of syllables layered on top of one another, pulling at the edges of the mind. Elena's lantern flickered, and for a moment, the light revealed something on the wall of a nearby barn. Symbols scratched deep into the wood, spiraling inward like a vortex. The villagers drew closer, their fear momentarily replaced by grim curiosity. Armin ran his fingers over the carvings. "These weren't here before," he muttered. "Someone's been writing recently." His voice carried more weight than he intended, and Elena noticed his hand trembling slightly as it lingered near the knife again. Daniar leaned in too close, his eyes wide, fixated on the symbols. His lips began moving, almost unconsciously, as though he were trying to echo the endless whisper. Elena yanked him back sharply, breaking his trance. "Don't listen," she snapped. "That's how it pulls you in." But before anyone could answer, the whisper stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Heavy, unnatural, pressing against their skulls. Then, from a far end of the street, something stirred. A shape emerged, tall and crooked, its limbs bending at angles that made no sense. It didn't walk. It lurched, each step snapping into place as though the bones beneath the skin were rearranging themselves. The villagers recoiled, some ready to bolt. Armin gritted his teeth. "It knows we're here." Elena felt her heart hammering, but she forced herself to keep the lantern lifted. No running, She said in a trembling but steady voice. If we run, it follows. If we stand together, maybe... Her words were cut short when the thing let out a sound, half a sigh, half a scream, that carried through the entire village. Windows rattled. Dogs barked in the distance, then fell silent all at once. The crooked figure tilted its head, as if savoring the fear that radiated from the group. For the first time since arriving, Elena understood. The village wasn't abandoned. It was alive, in its own way, and this thing was part of it. An old guardian, a collector, maybe even the reason no one who entered had ever left. And now it had found them. The crooked figure. The crooked figure advanced slowly, its movements unnatural and jerky, like a marionette with invisible strings. Every step it took made the ground shiver beneath Elena and the villagers. Its head tilted from side to side, unnervingly deliberate, as if it were studying them, measuring fear in ways that no living being could. Armin tightened his grip on the knife, his knuckles white, yet he knew it was futile. This was no ordinary creature, no animal to be fought with steel. Its body seemed hollow, but shadows swirled inside it, moving independently from its twisted limbs. Elena lifted the lantern higher, the dim glow cutting a weak path through the darkness. The light bounced off the barn walls. More of the carvings, symbols spiraling like black fire, their edges writhing in the flickering flame. The air smelled metallic, like iron and old smoke, and each breath seemed heavier than the last. Stay close, Elena whispered to the group. Don't let it separate us. The figure lurched forward again, its crooked limbs bending in ways that should have broken bones. With each movement, the whispers returned, a low, grinding chorus that scraped against their minds. Daniar covered his ears and fell to his knees, muttering fragments of the symbols aloud, as though reciting a spell he didn't understand. Elena grabbed him roughly, yanking him to his feet. No, focus. We move together, or we're done for. The creature's head tilted toward her, and for a moment, it felt like it smiled, though no human mouth could make such a thing. Then it let out a sound, a wet, rasping croak that shook through their bones. The ground beneath them shivered again. Suddenly, a window to the left shattered, and moonlight spilled into the street, illuminating the crooked figure in stark relief. Its body was longer than it should be, limbs twisted and stretched like shadows, pulled from nightmares. But the most terrifying part was its eyes, black voids, absorbing light, pulling the villagers' attention, making their hearts race and their knees weaken. Armin stepped forward, knife raised. We can't just... But Elena grabbed his arm. We can't fight it, she snapped. It's not just alive. It's part of the village. It knows this place. It remembers everything. The figure lurched again, faster this time, its long limbs swinging toward them. Panic surged through the group. Daniar stumbled backward, tripping over a loose stone. Elena lunged, grabbing him, pulling him upright. The lantern flickered violently, then went out. The darkness swallowed them instantly. Only the crooked figure's low, rasping echoed, like 1,000 breaths compressed into one. It was all around them, pressing in, surrounding them, but they could not see it. Not fully. Elena's mind raced. The symbols, the carvings, the whispers, they were all connected. If they could decipher them, maybe they could understand the creature, maybe even control it, or at least survive. Follow me, Elena shouted, though her voice sounded fragile against the oppressive dark. Through the barn. Stay close. Don't let it touch you. They ran blindly, the crooked figure moving with them, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always close, always watching. Each step felt like a heartbeat in the air, a pulse in the shadows. And as they entered the barn, Elena saw the carvings glowing faintly on the walls, the symbols vibrating as though alive. The whispers surged, louder now, almost intelligible, urging her to remember. Somewhere deep in her memory, a flicker returned. The knowledge that this place, the village, the crooked figure, and the symbols were all bound together. That someone long ago had tried to seal it, and that now they had failed. The figure lurched closer inside the barn, and Elena realized with a cold certainty. The night was far from over, and their fight to survive had only just begun. The heart of the barn. The barn loomed over them like a dark sentinel, its walls warped and twisted from decades of neglect. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the smell of rot mixing with the metallic tang of old iron. Elena's lantern flickered, throwing chaotic shadows across the warped wooden beams, and the carvings on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing, alive, as if breathing with their own intent. The crooked figure moved silently behind them, its long limbs bending at impossible angles. Even in the dim light, Elena could see its eyes, voids that drank in the flickering glow, making the shadows around it writhe and twist unnaturally. Every movement it made seemed to distort the air, sending a ripple of fear through the group. "Keep moving," Elena whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "Stay together. Don't look at it directly." Daniar's knees were trembling. He clutched his head, muttering fragments of the carvings they had seen outside. I think I can read them," he stammered. Maybe we can stop it." Elena's heart raced. "Do it. Whatever you can, do it now." The others pressed close, shielding him as he traced symbols into the dirt-covered floor with his fingers, whispering words that were barely audible, yet resonant. The symbols glowed brighter with each uttered syllable, feeding the barn with a strange, pulsating energy. The crooked figure lurched closer, as if testing their resolve, its every step accompanied by a deep, guttural rasp that shook the air. Elena gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus. The symbols, the carvings, they were not random. Each spiral, each jagged line was a piece of a lock. A lock that held the darkness, the creature, and the memories of the village in place. If they finished the sequence, maybe, just maybe, they could reclaim control. The air seemed to pulse with their efforts, vibrating against their skin like an electric current. Shadows twisted along the walls, forming grotesque shapes that mirrored the figures Daniar traced. The barn floor began to tremble. Dust fell from the rafters, and somewhere deep in the shadows, the crooked figure hissed, a sound like metal scraping over stone. Suddenly, the barn door slammed shut behind them, though no wind had moved it. The lantern flickered violently, almost extinguished, and the glow of the carvings surged, bathing the group in a ghostly light. Elena's breath came fast, shallow. The whispers were everywhere now, pressing into her mind, overlapping with Daniar's chanting. Then, a flash of memory hit her. She had seen this place before. Not as herself, but as someone else. A child long ago, standing in this very barn, drawing symbols into the dirt with trembling hands. The memory was blurred, but the fear was the same. She realized with a chilling clarity that they weren't just confronting a creature. They were confronting the house itself, alive, aware, and hungry for what they carried within them. Memory, fear, and forgotten promises. The crooked figure surged forward suddenly, faster than anything humanly possible. Elena screamed, raising her lantern, the light flaring in its face. But Daniar's chanting grew louder, stronger, his words now flowing with certainty. The carvings on the walls pulsed violently, sending waves of energy that pushed the figure back, forcing it to retreat into the deeper shadows. Elena stumbled, catching her breath, her eyes on the glowing symbols. "It's working! It's working!" she shouted, hope threading through the fear. The whispers reached a crescendo, then abruptly stopped. Silence fell over the barn like a heavy curtain. The shadows retreated, and the crooked figure froze at the edge of the glow, its voided eyes locked on the group. It hissed once, long and low, then vanished into the darkness beyond the barn walls, leaving only the faint echo of its presence. Elena dropped to her knees, gasping, her hands shaking. Daniar sank beside her, exhausted but triumphant. The carvings dimmed, the barn returning to the faint glow of the lantern. For a moment, everything was still. Then Elena realized this was only the beginning. The house had remembered them, and now it would never forget. They had fought the first wave, but the deeper darkness, the heart of the village and its secrets, was still waiting. And somewhere beyond the barn, in the shadows that the lantern's light could not reach, something stirred again. Into the heart. The barn's temporary calm was deceptive. Elena and the group lingered, catching their breath, but the heavy air pressed down on them like an invisible weight. The shadows along the walls seemed to twitch, restless, waiting for the next mistake. Daniel rubbed his eyes, exhausted, but his fingers still tingled with the residual power of the symbols he had traced. Elena straightened, gripping the lantern tightly. We can't stay here. That thing, whatever it was, won't leave us alone. We need to move. We need to find the heart of the village. The others exchanged nervous glances. The heart? Armin asked, voice low, still tense from the encounter. Do you even know where that is? I think so, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. The carvings, the whispers, they all point somewhere deeper, further in. It's like the village itself is hiding something. Something it doesn't want anyone to find. The group pressed forward through the barn's narrow exit, stepping carefully over fallen debris. Outside, the night had grown darker, almost suffocating, as if the very sky had folded in on itself. The trees along the edges of the property loomed like silent sentinels, their branches twisting unnaturally, reaching toward the ground and swaying even though there was no wind. Elena led them down a narrow dirt path, faintly illuminated by the lantern. The whispers returned, softer this time, coiling around their ears and minds like smoke. They seemed to guide them, urging them onward, pulling them toward some hidden center. At the edge of the village, they came across an overgrown courtyard. At its center was a circular stone well, ancient and weathered, its surface carved with spirals that matched the barn symbols. Elena's chest tightened. The well felt alive. Every instinct screamed that the answer, or the danger, waited there. Daniel crouched near the edge, examining the carvings. This is it, he murmured. This is the heart. Everything we've seen, everything we've felt, it leads here. The well, it's the anchor. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Shadows erupted from the corners of the courtyard, coalescing into shapes that resembled the villagers who had disappeared long ago. Some familiar, some twisted beyond recognition. Their eyes were empty voids, their mouths moving in silent, desperate screams. Armin raised his knife, stepping protectively in front of the others. We face it together, he said, his voice firm despite the fear crackling in the air. Elena approached the well, the silver key heavy in her pocket, its cold weight reminding her of the promise they had to fulfill. We have to open it, she whispered. Whatever is inside, we have to confront it, or the village will never stop feeding on fear. The shadows recoiled slightly as she stepped closer, as if the village itself recognized the act. The whispers grew louder, layered with memory and warning. Elena knelt at the edge of the well, tracing the spirals with her fingers, feeling the hum of energy beneath the stone. She inserted the silver key into a small, ancient lock she hadn't noticed before, hidden in the center of the carvings. A deep, resonant sound echoed from below. The ground vibrated, and the whispers became voices, clear now, almost pleading. The shadows twisted violently, resisting, but the key turned with a final, decisive click. The stone well began to open, not upward, but downward, revealing a staircase spiraling into darkness. The air rising from below was thick with centuries of trapped memories, sorrow, and malice. Elena felt it pressing against her chest, a weight that made it hard to breathe. Stay close, she warned, stepping onto the first stair. One by one, the others followed, lantern flickering, hearts hammering. The shadows lingered at the edges, watching, waiting, but for now, they held back. As they descended, the whispers grew more coherent. Words, names, and warnings tumbled over each other. Remember us. Do not forget. You promised. Elena's vision blurred as fragments of memories,